Hello, welcome to Community Matters. This is your host. I'm honored to be here, Becky Steinbrunner, and I want to thank you all for joining me this afternoon for the next couple of hours, learning more about issues that are very important in our community, how you can get involved and learn more. I would like to thank our studio host here, Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center. It is a fabulous place at 325 SoCal Avenue in Santa Cruz. That's located between Ocean Street and the beautiful San Lorenzo River. And it is a fabulous place if you need a workplace that's quiet, clean, secure, and very welcoming. Check out Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center. They have workspaces, meeting rooms, mail collection services, whatever you need, as well as digital media that you can rent for your podcast productions. Satellite Workspace and Digital Media, we share this place with community television. So thank you all for joining us here this afternoon at Community Matters. I am honored to have with me here in the studio Miss Sally Arnold, here representing Friends of Rail and Trail. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you talk just a little bit more? We'll do a sound check here.
Okay. Am I close enough to the mic here?
Yes, that's good. All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Why don't we start off with having you introduce yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself and Friends of the Rail and Trail.
Certainly. So I'm Sally Arnold, and I'm a retired elementary school teacher. And in my retirement, I got involved in volunteering with Friends of the Rail and Trail. It's a volunteer powered community group. We've been advocating for over 20 years for both the trail and the rail because together they're far more useful than any one of them by themselves. For those of people who may not, some listeners may not already know that there's actually 32 miles of track that connect Davenport to Watsonville that were built in the 19th century. And this community of Santa Cruz really grew up around that rail line. And the RTC, Regional Transportation Commission, bought that line about 15 years ago, specifically for adding passenger rail to our transportation mix locally. And we are also, and Friends of the Rail and Trail advocated for that purchase, but we also wanted to add a bike path and a pedestrian trail that would connect the communities and give people options to move around safely without a car if they chose that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think all of us are aware of this lovely opportunity, this spine of Santa Cruz County. Some people wonder, how did the trail aspect get added on to the RTC's purchase of the railroad track? How did that happen?
Actually, I'm not sure. That predates my involvement. Mm-hmm. I know that Friends of the Rail and Trail, it's right there in our name, have always advocated for both. Sometimes people try to mischaracterize us as the train people, but we are absolutely for both and advocating for both at every opportunity.
Yeah, indeed. And it can all fit together, you think?
Yes. There are some engineering challenges, there's no doubt about it, but just because something isn't easy to do doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Mm-hmm. And the ability for us to have a trail, I don't know if anybody has seen the West Side Trail. Your listeners may have, some of them probably live on the West Side, but others, if you haven't been over to the West Side yet, there's this wonderful section of trail that connects the intersection of Bay and California all the way over to the edge of town at Natural Bridges Drive. And it means that you can bike or walk to get to Safeway or the hardware store or all the various brew pubs and wineries that are out, on the far west side, or the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And it's totally changed the way people move around the west side. And just last week, there was the official ribbon cutting for another West Side segment. Were you there, Becky?
I was not, but tell us about it.
Oh, my gosh. It was amazing. It was 8:30 on, I want to say, a Wednesday morning. So I thought, it's going to be a few city workers and the press to take some pictures of the giant scissors cutting the ribbon. But it was hundreds of people.
Wow.
It was amazing. There were, it was, and at that time of day, I thought that was really remarkable. And because this little segment of trail, it connects that intersection at Bay in California. It goes parallel to Bay, and then kind of between Bay and the sewage treatment plant. And then it goes around and drops out at the wharf area. And so, I'm a West Sider, so I'm really familiar with trying to bike this area. The if you're on the West Side and you want to get down to the beach, either you used to have to go in front of the Dream Inn, where the tourists don't know.
Very busy.
Yeah, they don't know what's going on. They're driving in the wrong direction on the lanes. They're pulling their coolers up through the bike lane. It's just like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Or you had to go down Laurel, which is very steep, very narrow, and actually very slippery. There's like a creek there that seeps out.
That's right.
And so it was pretty dangerous, really, for pedestrians or cyclists. But now this trail parallels the tracks, and it's smooth, it's wide, it's virtually flat. I mean, you're making that drop, but it's so gradual you don't even know it. It's ADA accessible. That's one of the beauties of the trail. So anyway, it was super popular. The whole of Bayview Elementary came out and kind of made it their all-school assembly. And because, think about it, all those kids who live in the beach flats now have a safe way to get to school at Bayview. And the kids who live on the west side who want to go to junior guards down at Cowell's Beach, they have an opportunity to have a safe way to bike there. Yeah. And again, so it provides a level of independence and freedom and safety for the children, and some independence for their parents, who maybe don't have to drive them everywhere if they're lucky to have parents who have a car and have the time to drive them places. So anyway, it was a great opportunity, and really a wonderful example of how the trail is here. It exists in many places. It's getting lots of use, and in other places it's being built, and it's coming to a neighborhood to use soon.
Boy, that is a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. And I would imagine, since you live up there, you see a lot of people using it, yourself included, huh?
Yeah, it's amazing. And this little segment that just opened up is such a strategic connector, and because it's like below the grade of the street, a lot of people hadn't seen it getting built, and then suddenly it was open. And so when I'm walking on the trail, I'll just be friendly and say, "Hi, isn't this a great trail?" or something. And about half the people are like, "Oh yes, finally," and the other half are like, "I had no idea. Are they going to build any more of this?" For those of us who are steeped in these public issues, we think everybody knows about this, but really half the people I talk to have no idea. And I tell them, "Oh yeah, there's a segment being constructed right now that's going to connect Wilder Ranch to Davenport, and that'll be open in a couple of years." And they're like, "Oh, that's amazing!" And I mean, when people find out about it, they love it.
Wow, that is a great thing. And how was this funded? Do you know?
Transportation projects are generally funded by a mix of local money, which is called the local match, but it's usually a very small percentage of the money that is used. You may remember several years ago the Measure D that was to fund
the first one
to fund transportation. That makes us what's called a self-help community. So that means we can now apply. I say we, it's not me applying for these grants, but the people who work for the city and the county can apply to the state and federal government for grant money, because we have a local. We've committed. Our community said, "Yeah, we're willing to help pay for this," and so we can now attract that grant money. And the ratio can be phenomenal. Sometimes it's like 10-1. So we put up $1 and the state or feds give us 10. It's an amazing ratio. And I mean, and frankly, that's our money too, because we've all paid taxes to the state and the federal government, and it's being used to build somebody's transportation project. So the question is, do we want to bring some of that home and build transportation projects for us? Because we've already paid for it. So anyway, the state has what's called an Active Transportation Program, ATP. And our little county has attracted millions and millions of ATP money, both to build this segment of trail that was such an important connector to the west side to the wharf, and also for the mid-county segments that are going to go from the wharf all the way to State Park Drive in Aptos. And some of the largest ATP grants given anywhere in the state have been given to Santa Cruz County. And it's a testament to what a great project it is. And partly it's because it's not a trail alone. It's a trail next to tracks. So the funders realize that it means that people can use later, when the passenger rail comes, we'll be able to use that trail to get on a passenger train and go further. And so it's what they call a multimodal project. It's bikes, it's pedestrians, and it's trains. And together, again, they operate way better together than by themselves. And that's part of the reason we've been able to attract these phenomenal amounts of money to our county. I mean, we're one of the smallest counties in the state, and we're getting the biggest grants.
And I have heard that especially that section in the Capitola area, that segment 10 and 11, I think it was fully funded now through grant money.
Yes. The Capitola section is it's got some challenges. You know, we talked a minute earlier about just because it can be done, but it doesn't mean it's easy all the time.
Right.
So there, the planners originally had thought, well, first of all, you've got the west side of Capitola coming through like Jade Street Park area, right? And then eventually there's going to be a new bridge over the Soquel Creek, so people don't have to go down through the village on their bikes. But until that happens, that's the only way to get across. And of course, if you have a business in the village, you probably are really happy that people are coming by and might buy your ice cream cone or your slice of pizza on their way. But anyway, so that's going to come later, because that's that bridge will be expensive. But then there was a section that was parallel to Park Avenue. So imagine Depot Hill over to about New Brighton State Beach.
Yeah.
They looked at building it on the ocean side of the tracks. And that can be done, but it requires, if you're familiar with it, there's a very steep hillside with some houses at the top.
Yeah.
That will have to be taken back with a retaining wall. Some of the people at the top of the hill, I understand, have encroached on RTC property and, kind of like expanded their backyards. They'll probably have to lose some of that. And they have to cut down more trees. And it's just going to be a more expensive way to build. And then it turned out the city of Capitola had wanted what's called traffic calming on Park Avenue, because if you've ever driven on Park Avenue, people can drive very fast. They act like it's one long freeway out one ramp there. And so they wanted to narrow the lanes and add some crosswalks. And the people planning the trail were like, oh, well, you know what? If we put the trail on the other side of the tracks, the inland side of the tracks, we can use mostly RTC right-of-way, but a little bit of since you're planning on narrowing those traffic lanes anyway, we can use a little bit of the street for that. And there'll be a 5-foot buffer with plants or a fence or something in it, separating the bike and pedestrian path from the traffic. But the traffic lanes would be a little narrower. That always slows people down in a narrower lane. And there will be crosswalks to get people out of that neighborhood and to the trail, which, if the trail were down in the ditch on the other side of the tracks, people really couldn't access it that well. They could access it at 2 points, basically, New Brighton and Depot Hill, and not in between. But if it was on the inland side, be a lot more access for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it had a lot of advantages, and it was way, way cheaper.
Yeah.
And so the Department of Public Works were like, well, we were going to spend this money on Park Avenue anyway. If you being the county will use this ATP grant to give us the traffic calming we were going to spend our money on, sounds good to us. And if you need to take occasional slivers of the street, to narrow the traffic lanes, the car lanes, so fine. So all the various engineers who design infrastructure were on board. And then the city council voted no.
Oh.
And so...
Gosh, it was sounding so good, Sally.
Wasn't it, though? Well, there was some people who... I think some people were really misinformed about what was going to happen. Some people were told, "Oh, your kids will be biking in traffic," just because it's. But they were, there's a 5-foot buffer. It wasn't nobody was going to be in traffic. Anyway, there was a lot of misinformation that went around, and then people got very angry. Well, and that one of the city council members ended up resigning because there were a few hotheads who just got they were harassing people at work, harassing them at home, coming to city council meetings and threatening them.
Oh, no.
So anyway, they voted to they wouldn't allow, they can't stop the trail from being built, but they can say you can't use our slivers of street. And so, that more expensive alignment I told you about before on the
with the retaining walls
right.
and all of that.
Yeah, so that part of the trail will be built. It's going to take longer. It's going to cost more money. So yes, it was fully funded in the cheaper choice, but the more expensive choice, I'm not sure what they're going to do about the funding for that. And things that are more elaborate to build and have greater environmental impact and cost more money take longer.
Yeah.
So the trail will be built in that little section there, but it's going to take a while probably. And I think it's just unfortunate that I think some people just misunderstood what was happening. And anyway, there we are.
And it sounds like, including the city council,
they understood what was happening, but they were, like I said, they were intimidated
with the people.
Yeah, and enough so that, like as you're aware, one of them,
Mr. Peterson, resigned.
He resigned. He's just like, this is. It's not safe for my family.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. We can disagree on whether or not we think this is a good project, or we want to use it, or we want to put this in our community. There's legitimate disagreement to be had there, but treating people that way is just not okay.
It's not ever acceptable. I agree with you. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to Community Matters, and welcome. I'm your host, Becky Steinbruner, and I'm honored to have here in the studio with me Sally Arnold from Friends of the Rail and Trail. Emphasis on the "and," right, Sally?
Yes, we have a giant ampersand in our name.
Yeah. Well, tell us how people can become involved with FORT, as you are known.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, we are volunteer powered, and we are very lucky to be working on a super popular project.
Yeah.
All the votes around this and the polling that's been done show that anywhere from 72 to 78% of the people in the county like the idea of rail and trail together. And so in that way, it's a really fun, positive project to work on, and I encourage people who are in favor of the project and have a little time to volunteer to go to our website, railandtrail.org. You can learn a lot more about the project there, and you can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky. You can learn more about us in those ways. When you're at our website, railandtrail.org, you can subscribe. We have a newsletter that comes out every couple of months, again, because we're volunteer powered. It kind of comes out when we can pull it together. Anyway, we really we don't spam you with a bunch of unnecessary communication. We really just, when we have things to say, we send out a newsletter. When there is action to be taken, for example, there's a vote that we want our electeds to be aware of our the community position on. We will send out an action alert as well to you if you're a subscriber. So railandtrail.org to learn more and to subscribe. The same address, website if you would like to volunteer. So you go to railandtrail.org, and up near the top you'll see one of the buttons says Take Action, and then the drop down menu has a bunch of things to do: subscribe and volunteer. And if you click the volunteer button, basically, you'll get invitation to volunteer, and I'll be the one who calls you and asks you, what do you like to do? What are your skills? And then we'll match you up, because there's always things to do. We have volunteers who maintain the website and do all our technical stuff, and we have volunteers who write the newsletter and take the photographs that are on our website and in our social media feeds. We have volunteers who read through all those, and you know this, Becky, because I see you at all these public meetings. Those very, very, very long agendas. Sometimes they can be, 600-900 pages is not uncommon, digging through those. So if you're a policy wonk, we can definitely use you for that work. Friends of the Rail and Trail is networked with other transit advocacy groups in the state and nationally. And so again, if you're, the thing about transit, it's really interesting. It's having a moment right now, internationally actually, because people are realizing it's not about the bike, and it's not about the train or the bus. It's about what this provides us. It provides a level of independence. It provides increased equity access to economic or educational opportunities. It provides a way for us to get around without having to produce more greenhouse gas emissions. So it's an environmental issue. It's a safety issue, because the more cars, the more car crashes and injuries and deaths. It's really and so people who are working on economic issues and environmental issues and children's safety are all starting to recognize that transit is a key issue that you can work on and affect all those things you care about. And so people come to Friends of the Rail and Trail for a lot of different reasons. But that diversity is part of what makes us, I think, really strong. We joke sometimes that some of the people active in Fort, we don't agree on anything except this. We have
Well, that's
wide
good.
variety. Yeah, and we really try to make a big tent and make room for everybody.
You can still work together on something that matters as a common thread. That's very good.
Yeah, I think especially in these days of people kind of demanding, everybody has to agree with me or you're evil or something. It's like, we're definitely the big tent people.
That's wonderful. And do you have any idea about how many people do you have as your active core of volunteers?
Yeah, we have a board of varies from 9 to 12 people. We have, and then we have committees that meet mostly weekly, and each committee is led by a board member and then has volunteers on the committee that work to get our day-to-day work done. And then we have kind of coalition alliances with other organizations. I'm describing, people can't see, I'm describing a pyramid in my mind here. And then we have about 800 people who do something. Now, that doesn't mean they're doing something every day, but they write letters now and then to the editor, or they contact their electeds when need be, when there's a vote coming up, or they help us when we're doing community outreach at public events, or they write an occasional letter for our newsletter, an occasional article for our newsletter. Anyway, they're active in some way. They're engaged, or they're donors. And then we have about 12,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And they are, our hope is that once somebody's a subscriber and we can talk directly to them about this wonderful project, we might be able to move them up the pyramid. And indeed we do. And indeed we do.
Yeah, there's a job for everyone, no matter how much or how little time or the skills you have, right?
Exactly. I mean, and we have people who love to talk to others. They're super social, and we send them out in the community to talk. We have people who are don't ever make me talk to anybody. And great, you go do the programming we need on our software. It's there's something for everybody.
Yeah, I know that Fort was quite active in the second Measure D issue. Signs. I have a friend that stood at a corner with a sign, and she was very active in that.
Well, we actually there was a separate campaign committee, and because Friends of the Rail and Trail is a project of social good, which is a 501c3, and so we can absolutely lobby on issues that are ballot measures that are important to our cause. But we can't like endorse candidates or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of our people our volunteers are also active in other areas. So when the measure, the more recent Greenway Measure D came up that was designed to tear up the tracks, obviously it was a existential threat to the rail and trail.
Right.
And so yes, we opposed it. And then some of us left the board for a period of time to create a campaign committee and just work on that as a separate entity. So we had a campaign committee that really did the work on that. I mean, yes, Friends of the Rail and Trail opposed the issue, and we did some social media posts and stuff about it. But in terms of the day-to-day campaign work, that was actually a separate committee. That was formed to do that and raised money for that.
A political action committee.
Campaign committee.
Yeah. Wow. What great work. And what fun. You meet a lot of people.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And what's been really fun for me is just how positive the people are. I mean, I've been involved on and off in various, community issues over time, and a lot of times it was like, oh my God, stop this thing, that is somebody's proposed that we think is bad. But this is a positive, right? This is like, we can envision a better future, and we want to make it happen instead of just complaining about the things that are going on, like, we don't want to turn into some big sprawling suburban San Jose annex, right? And one of the ways to avoid that is, and to preserve our open space, is to concentrate development along that rail line. And if that rail line is in use, then people will want to live next to it. And, and so it's this really, the world is going to change. And, you and I are both of an age where we've seen it change, and we don't like all those changes probably. And this is a chance to try to steer it in a really positive direction. So we really attract a very positive crowd of people who very optimistic, and so they're very fun to work with.
Wanting to be proactive rather than reactive to something that you don't want.
Yeah. It's a very different way to move. It's a new one for me, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I wonder if you would like to open the studio lines up for any callers, or what you would like to do here, Sally.
Sure, we can open it up to callers, and while we're waiting for people to call in, I'd like to tell you about Pájaro Station.
Hey, I would like to hear about that. Now, there's going to be a bit of an interference as I hook this up, but go ahead. Let me see. Let me get this hooked up first. Actually, go ahead and start talking, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of finagling here on the screen. Go ahead, please.
Okay. All right, sure. Well, I wanted to say that our tracks, basically run from Davenport to Watsonville, and then they go over the river into Monterey County to the little village of Pájaro, and there is an old rail station in Pájaro that is being rebuilt by the Transit Agency of Monterey County, sometimes called TMC. So anyway, they are rebuilding that station, and our rail line is going to connect there. This means that we will not only be able to, I'll be able to, say, take the train to Watsonville to have dinner with a friend who, I would never go to dinner in Watsonville now, because for me, as a West Sider, it'll take for freaking ever, and for people in Watsonville who maybe don't have cars and therefore they don't have access to the better paying jobs in North County, it's going to make a big difference for them to be able to access those economic opportunities.
Yeah.
But we can...
Hold on. I'm going to click something. I think it's going to say something here.
All right.
Did it say something? No, I guess it didn't.
Okay.
We're okay. Good.
All right.
Good.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine. Well, anyway, so it means that not only can we move around more freely within the county without having to be stuck in that Highway 1 traffic, but we can leave the county. And I could take the train to Monterey to go to the aquarium and have dinner and come back and not have to worry about driving. I could take the train to San Jose and then on to San Francisco. I could take the train to Santa Barbara, or there's the rest of the world basically. It'll be our way out, and then it will also be the way in for tourists. Yeah. Because think of all those people who are coming from Gilroy and Salinas who want to come to the boardwalk or go to Aptos or Capitola Village. Well, all those places that are tourist magnets are also really horrible to drive in right now, and they will be able to arrive without their cars and step off the train, enjoy, lunch in Aptos Village, get back on the train, go to the boardwalk, ride the rides, go splash in the water for a while, get back on the train, and go home. And it will be, and we like to call it tourists without traffic. And not every tourist is going to make that choice for sure, but a lot of them will, and people who don't have cars certainly will. And then it'll really be great for our local economy. And it will really make places accessible to us that are, right now, again, some of these places that are, I'm a local, but I don't go to Aptos Village or Capitola Village that much because it's a little too far for me as a bicyclist. I'm not that strong a cyclist. And it's a mess with the car. But I would, if I could hop on the train. And that's an example of how bikes and trains work so well together. You can roll your bike, you can bike to the station, roll your bike on the train, get off wherever you're going near to, you're going, and then you can ride the rest of the way to whatever your destination is. And so it really, for me, I cycle almost every day to run my errands, but I'm not going to cycle 20 miles. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. And but this really will expand my range, and it will do that for a lot of people.
Yes, it will. And the status of that Pajaro station is moving right along, right?
It is. It is. They've the people at the Transit Agency of Monterey County have been looking at like 3 different possible locations, and they're working with the locals about like where would be the best spot. The people who really live near that, and they're also attracting a lot of state and federal grant money.
Yeah.
To go ahead and build that. I'm not sure exactly when it's expected to be activated again, but trains actually go through there now.
Yeah, they do.
But they don't stop at Pajaro anymore. My friend who lives in Watsonville tells me she remembers as a kid there was a roundhouse there.
Wow.
And I know, it was like before my time, but anyway, but that's going to all get revived, and I think people are recognizing that. I mean, cars are great in a lot of ways, but if everybody has a car, nobody goes anywhere. And so having a way for people to make choices that doesn't require a car really opens up opportunities for us.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
For those of you listening, thank you. And you're listening to Sally Arnold from Friends of the Rail and Trail here on Community Matters. If you'd like to call in and join the conversation in the last half hour here, please do so. The number to call is 831-265-5050. Again, 265-5050. And we'd like to have your opinion and hear from you what you think is important in the rail and trail line, and any questions that you may have. Sally is a wealth of information and has been very involved. So I'm very honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks. I wanted to say something more about the people who don't drive. I was surprised to learn that about 30% of the residents of our county don't drive.
Wow.
It's a lot. And when you think about it, it's like, okay, the very young, the very old, the disabled, people who can't afford a car because car ownership is very expensive, and that's a lot of people for whom this addition of rail would mean a lot. And I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, I wouldn't ride the train, and it's just like, well, good, but there are other people who are really feeling kind of stranded and it would help a lot if they could. Not every project is for me. Sometimes the projects are for other people who need need this service. And I was talking to a woman recently who's in a wheelchair, and I was thinking, she's going to like this because she'll be able to get on the train and go places because she doesn't drive. And she was like, yeah, but what I really want is for those of us in wheelchairs who have aides who help them like get up in the morning and get dressed and bathe and go to the bathroom and those kind of things. She said most of them are coming from Watsonville. And when they get stuck in traffic or their car breaks down, because it's not a well-paying job, and so they don't have fabulous cars, they have to get a car to go to work. And now if their aide has to call in and say, I can't come, or I'm going to be significantly late, she says, we're just stuck. We're in bed in our own mess, waiting for help.
Yeah.
And how are we going to get fed today? Are we ever getting out of bed today?
Wow.
And I had not thought of that. And she was like, this will mean so much for when people can take a regular, reliable transit so that we can get the help we need in our homes.
Yeah.
And that was just blew my mind. I had not even thought of that.
Yeah, that is a good point. And the bus service is pretty good, but it's stuck in all that traffic too.
Exactly. I mean, nothing against buses, but yeah, they're in the same traffic as the rest of the cars. Yeah. I mean, we hope that what we'll see is what we call pulse scheduling. So if the train is scheduled to roll into a station at, say, 41st Avenue at 12:02, then there's a bus that's scheduled to leave at 12:05, and that will then move you away and inland from the tracks. And together with pulse scheduling on the buses designed to meet the trains, which are not stuck in traffic and therefore should be more reliable. We could really have a network that would serve our community,
moving people through more quickly.
Yes.
Hey, you know what? We've got a caller. Shall we see who it is?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello, caller? Can you hear me? Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi. There we are. I'm sorry. I had the button down.
Excellent.
Thanks for
Can you hear
calling.
me?
Yes, we can. Welcome to
Oh my
Community
goodness.
Matters. What would you like to say? And thanks for joining the
Oh,
conversation.
y yes, thank you so much for hosting this. I'm very excited, and I just want to say and appreciate Sally Arnold and both of you for having this important discussion. Sally's done such an excellent job just covering so many important points about why having rail is so important to our community, and I absolutely support rail. I think about how when my kids were young, I would have loved to have had the train so that we could go to so many of the parks easily, and attended the Little Guards in Capitola and gone to the beach. We'd go to the beach. We'd have to drive, and of course, that's always stressful finding parking.
Yeah.
Um, and I think about how rail would be so important for our youth that, let's say, can't drive all yet, but they
Mm-hmm.
want to hop on and get around a bus or on rail, and that would give them an opportunity to get to those parks. There's Nissim Marks, there's Wilder. Then soon that trail will access um, the Katoni Coast Dairies, so they could take their bikes
Yeah.
on the rail and then get all the way to the Katoni Coast Dairies, and Aptos Village. And then I think about our seniors who, for example, a lot of seniors get to a point in their lives where they just don't feel safe driving, especially with how aggressive drivers are right now. And, a friend of mine who's blind, when her husband's in the hospital, she can't get a ride with him. Now, she uses public transit a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but having rail for her means she could get to the swimming pool in Simpkins. She could get to her appointments in Capitola, all the way from the west side. And right now it takes her over 2.5 hours one way to get to her
Mm.
appointment in Capitola.
When she
So there's
takes
just
the
so many
bus, it takes
advantages.
that long? You mean when she takes the
Yeah,
bus? Wow. Yeah, because of the
yeah,
transfers and all of that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's really hard. It's a hardship on a lot of people to not have the kind of access we would have with the rail line, which goes through some of these heart centers of our community of Capitola Village, Aptos Village, the West Side. It would be really great to have that access.
So you
So I
would
appreciate you.
you would ride the train now if it were available. How often and how much would you do that? Where
A
would you
hundred
do that?
percent.
Yeah.
I would be writing it if if not daily, every other day. Because to me, I would take it shopping. I would jump on with my bike to go riding in the parks. I would take it to Capitola Village to dine or to just enjoy the beach, and that's not feasible right now.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us, I think Sally mentioned earlier that she'd like to come to Aptos, but she's all the way on the west side, and I don't want to drive. I think that minimizing driving. So,
Yeah.
doing my part if I can bike, but you can only bike so far. So having the
Yeah.
rail, and then I see the greatest power in the future, and we really need to think more future wise, is that it's going to connect us to the rest of the state of California, to Monterey.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to Monterey more often and,
Hmm.
you know,
And
have
it
dinner
is
down
part
there.
of the state rail plan. I've seen those maps that is intended to be pretty well funded. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I have actually. And I think it's really exciting to
Mm-hmm.
imagine that any of us could easily get around the state of California without having to drive.
Mm-hmm.
Such such a wonderful opportunity that we have in our future,
Yeah.
and forward thinking that we could do that.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
and I'm curious. I have a question for Sally. It
Yes.
it seems like the Fort group and a lot of the participants have worked so hard to get us the access to build the rail and the trail. And yet it seems more recently there's been opposition. And I'm just really curious, um, kind of the lead up to building the rail and trail and the efforts that went in, and any thoughts that Sally has around why there seems to be more recent opposition.
Hmm. That's an interesting question. Well, I hate to, it's hard to speak for other people. But I will say that again, it's a small minority. I mean, and they have opinions, and they're entitled to a different opinion. That's fine. But I think there there's something that happens in our media landscape in a general way that likes a controversy. You know, uh, these people say this, but other people say that, and then suddenly it's a story. And so I think about climate change stories where it's like, I mean, every scientist on the planet just about agrees that climate change is happening and it's a problem. But it seems like everybody who writes the story feels obligated to go find the one person who doesn't agree and quote them, as if somehow that that kind of false equivalencies. And so I think that even though there is a minority of people who oppose the project, they're getting more airplay, so to speak, or more time in the press than is representative of their numbers. So I think there's a kind of a they look bigger than they are kind of thing. And then there are I think there's some people who are just they get agitated because they've got a misunderstanding, and I think some people have perhaps told them things that they may or may not have understood were not true. For example, what happened in Capitola, people were like so agitated about, like, my kid's going to be driving in, riding their bike in traffic, and it's just like there's a 5-foot buffer proposed between your kid and the traffic. It's way more safe than what you got right now.
Yeah.
And but once somebody's told something, I mean, if that were true, a lot of times the things I hear is like, well, if that were true, it would be alarming. It's going to be a coal-fired historic locomotive. It's like, well, that would be alarming. I don't want coal dust in my neighborhood either. But that's not what's being proposed. It's a zero emissions train, and so. I think that and once you have an idea that you think what's going to happen, and you oppose it, it's really hard to move off of something that you believe is true. And so I think that
I think those are
some of that opposition is well intended and misinformed.
Yeah, I think that's why I really appreciate hearing this show, because it seems like more often than not with some of the local media, you hear more of the negative. And yet, when you talk to people who really have that forward thinking, they want it. And you see that, I think I've read a survey that close to 74% of the community wants rail and trail. And yet this opposition seems to take some precedence in our media, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But an interesting thing, I know when there was the Coast Futura came to town.
Oh, yeah.
I think people who had no idea of what it could be like rode it, and suddenly they got it. It's like the light bulb went on. So I think some people just don't have an understanding of how advantageous it could be.
Yeah. It would be great to bring back the Futura, wouldn't it? And just do another pilot project of it. That would be wonderful. Were you able to ride it, Lonnie?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. And I'm sure you did, Sally.
Oh yeah, yes. It was. We worked really hard in a very short period of time to bring it. When we found we got permission to bring it, we needed to do it before the weather turned bad, in the winter, and then we had 6 weeks to pull that together. And people at Roaring Camp were great friends, and they worked with the STB and the FRA to get all the permissions, and then we worked hard to raise the money to bring the Coast Futura here, and all the volunteers. I mean, there were hundreds of volunteers who helped flagging
At crossings,
at the crossings, and taking the taking tickets and things. Anyway, it was fabulous. It was really a wonderful opportunity. It was a boatload of work, but it really, I think, as Lonnie said, very much nothing like seeing it and like, oh, this is what it would be like.
Yeah.
It was really fabulous.
Yeah. Excellent.
It was really fabulous to see people's eyes just open and go, oh my gosh. We drove, we had some people drive a car from the boardwalk to Capitola in the same spot where the Coast Futura traveled. And it took 10 minutes by the Coast Futura, and it took over 20 minutes by car.
Yeah. Well, that was a good
Even
day.
even though it was going slow, much
Yeah.
slower, 10 miles
Yeah.
per hour. So.
Well, Lonnie, I want to thank you for calling in. Is there anything else you want to say? We've got one caller waiting here in the queue.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, Becky, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
your service.
Thank you so much for calling in and joining Community Matters today. All right. Thank you. Take good care of yourself. All right.
You too.
All right. Let's see if we can get this other caller on now. Hello, caller. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi. Welcome to Community Matters. What would you like to say? And do you have any questions for Sally Arnold?
Well, I think that when the public hears the word disability, that they automatically disengage. They're afraid of speaking on a subject without feeling that they have any entitlement to. There's some fear out there that one has to be have training, education. But the thing is disability is a natural part of the spectrum of life. 26 out of 100 Americans identify as having at least one disability. And we are all far more likely to lose some of our vision, to have a hearing impairment, or lose some of our mobility at any point in our lives than we ever are to have a fully autonomous driving vehicle, right? Electric cars have been available in the United States since the 80s. Not a single one today is in production for wheelchair users. And of course we know that self-driving is also not viable.
Yeah, it's
So
still
I
in
think
the pilot stage, isn't it?
I think when people on the other side of the rail issue, will say, well, we need a trail. We're going to ride our bikes to Watsonville or not. No, the period of life where anyone can think of themselves as possibly being in the prime of their life it's an incredibly small period of time, maybe 12 to 20 years. If you're fortunate enough to have everything you need and can afford expensive habits and have the time free during the part of the day when the weather's good for you. Right? But
So
we're all, yeah.
So are you feeling like having a train would better serve more of the people of those 26 out of 100 Americans, that's a pretty high number, having some sort of disability? Do you feel like a train would better serve people in general?
Absolutely. Some people would like to say that, don't you think a bus, that comes closer to where you live is a better idea? Well, if you think that the idea that every day that you step out, that you leave your house, that a bus is going to be more convenient and faster, whichever bus line's closest to you, that's akin to winning a bet against the house every day, which totally bucks the odds. But Santa Cruz County grew up around the rail line.
Yeah.
We're all squeezed into this little space between the mountains and the ocean, and so it makes sense that everything is centrally located. And most of the zip codes, census information, tells us that most of the zip codes through which the rail corridor runs have a higher percentage of people living in them with disabilities than almost all the other than most of the other zip codes in the county.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and an uncovered trail alone is that is no replacement for people movers. And you got to imagine that a lot of people with limited mobility or who use a manual or motorized wheelchair often have trouble regulating their temperatures, whether that's getting too hot or too cold, or both. Because once you are unable to move as much, you magically start having all kinds of problems, and poor health outcomes.
Yeah. So a trail alone does not really serve or well serve that that segment of the population. Do you have a question for Sally that you'd like her to answer?
No, but I would like to invite anybody who's finds themselves on any side of the rail and trail, the so-called debate, because it's already, voters already made that choice. On July 12th on Cowell Beach, there is a massive party for people with disabilities and their friends and their families and anyone they invite. Come on out to Shared Adventures event, Day on the Beach, and be around some of the people and their friends and family who would likely most benefit from the benefit of having rail commute and a trail, running through the county. And you'll see that we all have the same needs and the same wants as anyone else. And the idea is that we all like to do the same things. Let's do them together. So that's Saturday, July 12th, Day on the Beach, and then see who their allies are.
Thank you very much, Sean. Day on the Beach.
Have a good day.
July 12th. And how do we find out more information about that?
sharedadventures.org.
Yeah.
There's also they have there's a video available. I think it's on their main page that Time.com made about the organization and about this annual signature event that they've been throwing for.
Beautiful. All right. Well, maybe we'll get Shared Adventures here on Community Matters as time goes on. Thank you so much for calling in and really helping us understand the bigger picture here. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. We've got another caller. Do you want to take that, Sally?
Sure.
Let's
do it.
All right. We got another caller here. Hello. Diane, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you for calling Community Matters. We've got about 8 minutes left. I'm going to say 5 because I want to give Sally some time to wrap up. Please go ahead and thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to be real short. So I guess, I'm a supporter of rail and trail, and I really get very disturbed by all of the vitriolic social media thing that's going on. Opponents have seemed to kind of taken a lesson from the Trump crowd about just spreading misinformation. So I just hope that people will, the general public, if you're interested, you want the facts, go to the Regional Transportation Commission website. That's the Santa Clara County Regional Transportation Commission.
I think you meant Santa Cruz.
Their website just has everything you could possibly want to know, and it's all factual. It'll bring you up to date with all the studies and the facts. So that's what I wanted to say. If you're not sure where you stand, or even if you already decided you're opposed, maybe it's worth looking at our government agency that has spent over 20 years trying to get this going. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in. Sally, do you want to respond to that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I think Diane probably meant the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission. And yeah, they have a vast website. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's got like a lot of information in it. But yeah, I mean, and they're very much on the just tons of information that you can dig into. There is, I will tell you that, they've been doing a lot of open houses and public events around the rail planning recently, and they are going to come out with a draft report or proposal in probably June, and it will have like some ridership projections and some cost projections and some suggested places for, we should have stops here and we should do it like that. And then the summer will be an opportunity to comment on it. And of course, I'm sure that none of us will agree with everything that's in the proposal, and it's an opportunity to make suggestions and try to make it better. And if they're not giving us a stop in your neighborhood where you would like one, say something about it. Mm-hmm. And if you want to see more frequent service than they're proposing, then say something about it. This has been a very there's been a lot of community engagement on this, and so it's an opportunity to offer better, suggestions to make it better. And then I'm not sure exactly what their process is going to be. They'll probably have some online ways to gather information and probably some in-person meetings. And then in the fall, they will have kind of incorporated our suggestions as the members of the public into the plan, and they'll have a revised final version that they will bring to the commissioners for a vote, probably in September, and then they can vote for proceeding with the plan. So, or the commissioners might say, well, we like this parts of the plan, but not those parts. So it'll be a very active time to engage in the nuts and bolts. If Diane was if Diane's suggestion appeals to you about looking at the Regional Transportation Commission's website, you'll have lots of things to look at real soon.
Yeah, and sometimes it can make one's eyes glaze over when you see those big reports. But what I think a good way to connect with all of that is to go to community television, Government on Demand, and you can see the video recordings of those Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation, or RTC, Commission meetings, and then you can listen to the discussion. And if something really piques your curiosity, then you can go find the reports and dig in, or the correspondence, some of which has been submitted by, the people of Friends of Rail and Trail and other groups, certainly. I always try to approach all of it with an open mind. But community television, Government on Demand, you can look at those meetings.
Yeah, and if you want like the summary version, I would suggest that you subscribe to the Friends of the Rail and Trail newsletter. We're again railandtrail.org, and then go to the Take Action pull-down menu, and you'll see subscribe. And we try to take those hundreds of pages of reports and hours of community meetings and distill it into something brief and digestible. So if you get intimidated by all the information and you just want the summary version, subscribe to our newsletter.
That's wonderful. We have had as a guest here at Community Matters a couple of times Sarah Christensen, who is the executive director of the RTC, and she is going to join us again this summer once these studies are open to public comment. We've got one caller coming in. I don't know. Let me take them, and if they can do it in a minute, we've got just a little over that. Is that all right?
Sure.
All right. Hello, caller. Can you hear us? Hello. You've got 1 minute if you want to call in, if you want to speak.
Hi, Becky.
Oh, this is Brian Roeder.
Brian,
thank you.
yeah.
You're our next guest. All right, thank you. I'm going to just let you hold here. We're finishing up the first hour, and thank you for calling in.
Of course.
All right, thank you so much. Sally, I'd like to thank you again for taking time to come to the studio, for all your work on this, and I want to give you the last couple of minutes, 1 minute here, to finish up and encourage people to get involved.
Certainly. Go to the railandtrail.org website or follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, and just learn about what a great vision this is for our community. And we hope that you will at least subscribe, if not volunteer. And those of you who are skeptics, just read some of what we've got to say, and maybe you'll become more open to the vision.
There we go. Have an open mind and think about the greater good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. Sally Arnold from Friends of the Rail and Trail. Many trails opening up this late, even down to the boardwalk, and providing safe transit for kids. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much.
Am I off the air?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That was a fun discussion.
Gosh, thank you. Time goes quickly.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I very much appreciate all you do.
Oh, well, thank
and
you.
I really support the train.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that.
We have for a long time, and we rode this. It was back in 1996. There was a train.
Oh, the suntan. They brought back the suntan
Yes.
special, didn't they?
Oh, that was so beautiful.
Yeah, I missed that. That was, I think, I was just not that plugged in yet.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't even.
It was wonderful, and I remember I was very pregnant with our son, and my husband and our older daughter got off at the boardwalk, and I went up to Wilder Ranch.
Oh, did you?
Oh, it was fabulous.
Oh, that's
just
wonderful.
Fabulous. So I'm looking forward to taking that ride again. But I'm a little concerned because when I went to a recent meeting at the public meeting, they're not going to take the train up to the west side.
Well, that's a whole debate. There are some who want to stop. They want to. Do you know where the Y is? Down. Yeah. Okay. So some want to go to Depot Park, stop, and then go back south.
Yeah.
And others, those of us who live on the west side, are saying, why don't you stop instead at the Marine Sciences place, right? Which is only a couple of blocks. You know, it's closer to the boardwalk, but a little further away from downtown. But it's in the same area, and then go on to the west side.
Yeah.
Because there's all those people over there to serve, and there's employment centers over there.
The university.
And access to the university. There's 2 buses that go straight up from the tracks up to the university, up to the west east entrance, and they go up Natural Bridges Drive up to the west entrance.
Yeah.
And so. Be a really easy transfer. I mean, it's not like you couldn't get on a bus down to Depot Park and get up to the university, but think of how much harder it is to get there.
So much more convenient.
Yeah. So anyway, that's one of those things that, I'm loving it. Obviously I'm advocating hard for the train, but I don't agree with everything they're proposing.
Yeah.
And I think we need to speak up so we get a system that serves our needs. Yeah. I mean, the consultants are doing their best, but they're not locals. I mean, they're train experts, not Santa Cruz experts.
Right.
And so we have to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, and thanks so much for the water.
Oh, you're so welcome. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Brian, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Brian?
I can.
Excellent. All right, thank you. I said goodbye to that first hour guest, and I really want to thank you for calling in. Thank you for all you do. I don't know how you do it.
I missed it last time.
Oh, no. Never apologize.
I felt terrible about that.
No. Don't give it a thought because you had a lot going on. And you know what it did is it opened up the hour for local discussion. Some people from the Santa Cruz. Yeah, absolutely. That's always good. So I hope that you are taking good care of yourself in all of this.
It's challenging. We're lucky, Becky, because we're able to move. It's been very challenging to pull this off. But, with our 7-year-old and my wife being, he's great. My wife's been sick, as you know. So we've had to move. But the real tragedy is so many people can't get out. They're fixed income, or they've got their livestock and their animals. And, or they just can't figure out a way to sell their places. So it's really hard for a lot of people. And just as a refresher on that, what's so strange about this is, setting aside when it happened, while the fires were raging in L.A. and planes were crashing, change of administration, it was, lots of people are they think it's strange that this seems to be such an issue because it was a fire that went out. We've been told by various authorities, nothing to see here. But there are hundreds of people in these communities that were impacted that got really sick. And they're kind of the same folks who we heard about getting clobbered during COVID, seniors, people with immunocompromised systems, people with bronchial issues. So you've got thousands of people who breathe in this just horrible mix of chemicals and
Yeah.
metals that are very toxic,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
Yeah.
people who are healthy to begin with really didn't detect symptoms per se, many of them, or
Yeah.
they thought they had a cold because it's the middle of the winter, right?
Right.
But the people who were already, vulnerable, or just so many of them just got really, really
Yeah.
hammered with breathing
That's
problems and
awful.
all kinds of stuff. So,
We're going to go
they
on
can't
the
get
air
out, and
here.
we
Brian, I'm
did.
going to interrupt you because we're going to go on the air here
Yeah.
in 5
Oh, okay,
seconds,
good. I
and
thought we were
we'll
there.
talk
Sorry.
about. Thank you. Hello, welcome back to Community Matters. I'm your host and honored to be here with you for another hour. My name is Becky Steinbrunner, and you are listening to Community Matters. I want to thank our satellite workspace and digital media center again for having this lovely facility that you can come rent, come check out for free on the second Wednesday of every month. Great place for a meeting if you need a small, secure, safe, very welcoming environment in Santa Cruz. It's at 325 Soquel Avenue in Santa Cruz between Ocean Street and the beautiful San Lorenzo River. And there are lots of things that are available here for you if you need a remote workspace that's maybe not at your kitchen table. Or you want to have a post office collection, they can do that all for you. So if you are in a place where you've got a pretty high overhead and you don't use it much because you mostly work remotely, maybe check out Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center. We share this space with community television, another gem in our community. So I want to thank again Sally Arnold from Friends of Rail and Trail for joining me in the first hour. And now I want to thank and welcome Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing calling in and tell us what's happening now. Brian, I want to thank you for taking time. You are crazy busy with everything you are doing. Please introduce yourself and talk with us about what's happening.
Well, Becky, thank you. You're so gracious to invite me back and invite us back. So I'm a co-founder of Never Again Moss Landing. It's an all-citizen, all-volunteer group of folks here who were really impacted by the Moss Landing power plant battery storage facility fire that happened on January 16th and then smoldered for another 5 to 6 weeks, spreading a lot of industrial waste into the atmosphere and into our environment. And, we're not happy to have to be doing this. We're not,
Yeah.
it's a role that we never wanted to play. My colleague, Tanya Rivera, and I met with Jimmy Panetta's district director today, was very gracious to talk to him about what's happened and ask for, perhaps for Congressman Panetta to come here and hear from the community. What's so strange about this event, aside from terrible timing, which was during the fires in LA, planes coming down, change of administrations, so it really got lost in some ways in the mix. What's really strange about this is that, here's this cloud that went all over the region, and most people didn't really get sick or didn't get seriously sick. Maybe they thought they had a cold or something. But people who were immunocompromised, bronchial issues, seniors, some kids who were in this fairly large area where this stuff came down and breathed it in, they got really sick. And we didn't know going in that that's what this would look like. We didn't know that we would get sucked into this whole thing of trying to help our community. We didn't know that, that the state wouldn't really show up to help out.
Yeah.
We didn't know that all these things would happen. We just knew that something extremely terrible had happened. And there's been a lot of things along the way that just don't make sense. I mean, a lot of folks have heard that there's really nothing to worry about. The EPA keeps saying that they tested for particulate matter. They tested for this one thing, hexafluorine. But I don't know why they did it the way they did, but the reality is that hexafluorine is lighter than air, and their testing stations were on the ground. So, It all went up. It didn't go to where they were testing. Why the EPA didn't know that, I'm not sure. Why they weren't testing for what was actually happening, I'm not sure. And to this day, they're still saying that nothing to be alarmed about. They also tested for particulate matter, and I've seen the data, and up in the valleys and the mountains, San Luis Valley and whatnot, the particulate matter levels were higher. The problem is that this fire burned so hot that it literally vaporized all of these toxic materials, including these metals that we found in our testing. And that meant that it was smaller than what they were testing for. So, of course, they didn't find it because they only went down to a certain size. And below that is where these things were in the air.
Yeah.
So, but they continue to say, nothing to worry about.
Nothing happening here.
This stuff. But that's not what happened. And it's very disheartening to see how the authorities have really, in many ways, run away from this.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people in this community who are really, really, really harmed by this. And that's not the story we're getting, but it's the story that you continue to cover, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I very much appreciate all the work that you and the Never Again Moss Landing folks, the community, the people, are doing. And I appreciate Monterey County Supervisor Glenn Church for really being there side by side with your community people. We in Santa Cruz County have no such advocate. It's there. It is the silence is deafening, and I know that you folks in Monterey County. It's a geographic boundary, but that plume came over Santa Cruz County too.
It did.
And I know that you have said the cavalry isn't coming. And so I'm very interested to hear more about why Congressman Panetta has been absent.
Well, I can only speculate. What I can say is this. Not all this is really in his jurisdiction. Even though this is physically his jurisdiction, there are a lot of layers between what has happened here and what it is that he can effectively do about it. And I understand that, okay? But just like John Laird, they just haven't been here. They haven't shown up. And I think, again, this is my own personal view, but what I've been learning is that it's not just here. This Sunday, we're having a national panel discussion at, of all places, the Prunedale Grange, right?
Lovely place.
But we're having this national panel of people who are scientists and also people who have been to these kinds of disasters elsewhere. There's a couple of people who've been very involved in the East Palestine train derailment. And the government response there was very similar to what we're seeing here. So it seems like time and time again when these industrial disasters happen, the biggest surprise I found is that the federal and state authorities are not here, and they're really running away from it. Now, when you talk to these folks, as I have, they'll say, we're doing stuff behind the scenes. And we say, yeah, but just come show up. Join the community, listen to the community, be present, right? And that doesn't happen. And so whether it's Jimmy Panetta or, Senator Laird, who I've been a big fan of up until now, but who's really, really let us down as far as I'm concerned. These folks, I guess they just figured it's just too big, too complex, too messy. There's a lot of, to some degree, capture too. Like the EPA, the way we set everything up is that these agencies work hand in glove with industry specialists who are the experts in these matters. And when something goes sideways, they've kind of gotten to know the people on the industry side, and there's a real hesitancy to say, you just really messed up the environment. It's a lot easier to have the industry with their experts and their PR people say, hey, don't worry about it, everything's fine. And then for everybody to say, okay, it's fine. And then we all kind of go back to sleep. But it is cumulative. Our volunteer efforts really began when we tested throughout the community, something that nobody else has done. We did it on our own dime. 124 tests from Davenport to Carmel Valley, all the way over to Hollister, and there was one up in Fremont. And what we found is that at the far distant areas, we were seeing 4 metals: lithium, cobalt, manganese, and nickel. We were seeing them in levels that were something like 1/2 to 5 parts per billion. And when we looked at where the impacts were, which were generally in a ring about 3 to 8 miles from the plant, because things got really hot, went up in the air, went sideways, cooled down, and came down. In those areas, we were seeing numbers that were 200 to 600 parts per billion, just orders of magnitude greater deposition of these very toxic materials. And, you know, it's really boggles my mind that we were the ones that had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That if we hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have a record of that, right? And in fact, the state has taken the position that our data is not useful.
What?
And of course it's not, because it tells a story that they don't want to be told, really, because it's messy and it shows that something terrible happened.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard to interpret the data. You know, in all fairness, you know, what does it mean, 600 parts per billion of nickel? You know, normally you see numbers like that inside a nickel factory, and the feds come in and say it's too high, perhaps, and everybody's wearing PPE. Here we're talking about that's on a surface wipe. So does that mean that how much was in the air?
Yeah.
So getting that interpretation is very difficult, but it clearly shows the presence of some really bad stuff in really alarmingly high levels that we were all breathing in.
Yeah.
We have the wind models. We have the air current models. We know where this plume went. We have a pretty good idea what was in it because we know it was in those batteries when they burned. All 80,000 by the company's own estimate.
Wow.
The largest battery storage facility in the world until the day it burned. And so, you know, whether it's Jimmy Pernetta or it's, you know, Senator Laird, these guys, they're just not here and they're not engaging. You know, John Laird's most recent newsletter doesn't even mention it.
Oh,
you know, and
my goodness.
It's just, you know, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Why? What we said to John Laird when we met with him was that, you know, if you're not present and you're not here helping us, how are we going to believe you the next time you tell us it's all going to be okay?
Mm-hmm.
You know, in Santa Cruz, you're looking at Pinto Lake area.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at Aptos High.
Yeah.
You're looking over by Dominican, right?
Yes.
And they're much smaller, and we're being told it's a different chemistry and it's more stable, and it is, but it still burns.
It
Becky.
still burns.
And if it does, it won't mess up a whole region, but it's sure going to take out those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about that. They want to make it sound like, hey, and there's a reason for that too, Becky. And look, I'm all for decarbonization. It's critical that in my view, there's no debate. It's critical that we do what we can to decarbonize our economy. At the same time, 2045 looms. That's when California is trying to be decarbonized completely. So the batteries are at the heart of this. And the problem we have is that they are a technology that's failing us.
Uh-huh.
And because of the commitment to decarbonization, the people at state government just can't deal with, it seems, the fact that their number one power plant at the heart of this agenda burned. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a third generation of batteries and other types of technology that can store energy safely. Mm-hmm. Under development, several different options. Mm-hmm. And if these guys would just slow down a little bit and quit racing to put in the batteries now that are so dangerous, so toxic when they burn, if they just would take a breath, and that's all we're asking them to do. Yeah. Stop, listen, and learn so that we can see that what we're doing right now carries enormous risks. We just saw that play out at Moss Landing. We have enormous risks in the way we're doing this. And if we just slow down a little bit, we might have a much better solution. You know, John Laird, I watched one of his interviews on this, and what he said was 75% of our batteries are safe. They're the new technology. And, implicitly, that means that 25% of the batteries are what just burned up at Moss Landing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? That 25% of the storage facilities in the state of California are the same chemistry as the incredibly volatile batteries that burned up at Moss Landing. And you know what? All it takes is one D-sized battery in that power plant to light that thing on fire. One D battery could have been the cause of that conflagration.
We're not getting any information about the after action analysis and investigation of the cause, are we?
Well, no, because Vista's responsible for all that. They don't want to. I don't think they really are particularly interested in having that information released widely. So,
but didn't the CPUC
the
and Governor Newsom, they all went on front of the camera and demanded to have that report. Where is it? Where is it? Yeah.
We don't even know if it's been done or started. See, communication. Look, I have a communication background, right? Facilitation, communication, management. It's pretty obvious that if you're doing something, you want to communicate that you're doing something, especially when there's a disaster.
One would think.
So if they're not communicating, what's the assumption? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy. They simply reach out. They say, community, here's what we're doing. But unfortunately, at the very beginning, it was, some platitudes. And we don't see any indication that any of this stuff is happening. We really don't.
Now, Monterey County has just launched a second round of soil and maybe water testing. What are you hearing about that?
Not a lot. The challenge is that we're 4.5 months into this, right?
Yeah.
So, and, they did the first round and they found elevated levels, but they were only within about 3 or 4 miles of the plant. Well, you'd expect that, right? Just like Professor Aiello found the huge elevations there in the slough in the week after the fire. But we've had a winter, we've had storms, we've had, what I suggested to Supervisor Church was that if he has any ability to have influence over what the environmental people decide to do, it would probably be wise to test the mud in the bottom of ponds, right? Because, this stuff is everywhere. It's washing off, and it does. It's going into low spots, and it would seem to me that's where the ponds are. I don't know if they're doing that. It didn't sound like they were. There've been protocols for how to do this that haven't been correct for what happened. Part of it is because this has never happened before, but it seems pretty obvious that, when Santa Cruz goes in and scrapes the top 4 inches of soil for a sample, they're mixing the very top quarter inch, which is where the stuff is, with a whole bunch of other material that doesn't have it in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the prescribed process, is not actually effective in determining what's come out of the plant.
Right.
It seems to me.
I agree with you. And that is what we have learned from Dr. Aiello from the Moss Landing Marine Lab, San Jose State University, and their fabulous work. That not only skimmed off the top 1 to 2 millimeters where the stuff fell, so it was an accurate, undiluted measurement, but they had the decade-long base study of what was there before. And they have the information that showed the nanoparticles connected with the soil particles, that a direct correlation of the fire.
Yes.
And
they also found really big chunks. I mean, he's got pictures he's put up of 3 and 4 inch across chunks of melted metal. So it all came out. So it was explosive.
Goodness.
Definitely explosive when it was initially burning.
Yeah. Hey, you know what, Brian? We have a caller. Do you want to accept a call now?
Absolutely.
Okay,
sure,
very good. I'm going to accept this call from Bill, and anybody else out there that wants to call in, you're welcome to do so. And we're speaking with Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing. The number to call is 831-265-5050. Hello, caller. Hello, Bill. Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
Excellent.
You two are doing a good thing. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Bill.
I wanted to clarify something I just heard Brian referencing, and that was the 25% old-style dangerous batteries and 75% new.
Yeah.
And then saying that 25% are still the old battery chemistry. That's not the way it was explained to us by Senator Laird. What he said was 25% of what we've got, including what burned, It's the orientation or the configuration of the batteries that is the dangerous style, and that is a whole bunch of batteries in close proximity to each other in a place where it's easy for a fire in one to spread to another and set it alight. And then the 75%, the new safer way of doing it, that is they're compartmentalized. They're steel containers that will hold a much, much smaller number of batteries, and then there are a bunch of these so that the thought is they will contain a fire within one, and it'll be much smaller for that reason if any ever does catch a light.
Bill, you're exactly right. And, my response to that is that if a container pops next to Aptos High, it's still going to mess up my parents' homes, which are just down the road. So, yes, you're correct. The idea that 25% are in large spaces makes it even in some ways worse. And the fact is, yes, we have more stable chemistry, which is actually more toxic if it does burn, and they are burning, by the way. And we also have these containers, which are smaller collections of batteries. The challenge we have is that the state is approving every month dozens of these smaller installations, and they're going in everywhere. So what's the difference ultimately between a massive facility like Moss Landing and hundreds of smaller facilities that catch on fire? So the risks are still very real. The scope is smaller. Instead of massively industrially polluting a huge region, as happened with Moss Landing, you just got neighborhoods that are going to be horribly impacted when these things burn. And I'm not saying they'll all burn. Most of them won't. But some of them are, and some of them will, and they're very impactful. So it's a great point you make, but I'm still very concerned about the containerized, smaller collections also for that reason.
And you should be. The first time he described this to us, he said, the new orientation makes it impossible for the fire to spread. And my reaction was, the Titanic was also declared unsinkable, but that didn't mean it couldn't sink. So we're kind of rushing headlong into it, and the feeling I get is those who are pushing this are just bound and determined to make it happen. So trying to put the reins on it, I think, is wise.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't think that the reins are going to be put on it. I don't see, we're not living, in my view, in a world in which there's so much that people are concerned about, and this is just another thing. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be enough mobilization on this issue, at least at this time. And we just had a massive disaster, and yet, we're all moving on. So absent that, I just don't see the trajectory changing. And I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see it.
Understanding is we already have batteries of a different chemical composition that we could use now that are as good or better than these more dangerous ones.
Yes.
And we're making great strides on the molten sodium batteries.
Absolutely.
We're going to get to a better place real soon, so we don't need to charge this fast forward, in my opinion.
I agree. I'm completely with you, Bill. Absolutely.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you for taking my call, and thank you both for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thanks for tracking on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, Bill makes a good point about why the rush? Who made this deadline? And for Santa Cruz County, the deadline is much sooner. It's 2030 that the Santa Cruz County government made this climate action plan that we will be 100% renewable energy by 2030. Why the rush?
Well, again, this is all speculation. Here's what I would say, Becky, is that the rush is because we're seeing the effects of 150 years of, putting too much carbon in the environment. So I get that, right? But there's a huge commitment that has also been made. And it's almost like once you go over, once you go over to the commitment, it's really hard to shift back, right? Or to take another look at it. And besides which, here's the key thing. So from the state on down, and this is happening in other places too, although California really is tip of the spear, what's happened is that state and local authorities have placed so much responsibility for achieving these goals in the hands of private industry. So here's what the game is, okay? You ready for this? So all of us have been good citizens and put solar panels on our roofs. Not all of us, but many of us, right? And we've got our wind farms, and we've got, all of these things that we've done, which is great. And we're producing more energy than we're using during the day. So what's happening is that these companies are putting in these great big banks of batteries. And once it's there, what is their business? Well, they buy our energy that we're creating on our own dime very cheap during the day because we have too much. There's a glut of it, so they can buy it for really cheap because it's a marketplace. Then what they do is they store it in these batteries. And then at night, when we don't have the sunshine and we need to have the power, they're selling it back to us for far more than what they paid us. They're literally doing this. We're selling it to them using the infrastructure that we by and large paid for, and then they're selling it back to us for a dear price at night. So what's happened is that to achieve decarbonization goals, what we're doing is we've put our elected officials have put into the hands of industry all of this responsibility to make this goal happen, right? But industry is profit motivated. Look, I'm as much a capitalist, probably the next one down the road. I was president of the Chamber of Commerce years ago in my community. I mean, but at the end of the day, industry is profit motivated. They've got to answer their shareholders. So if you have industry buying this stuff cheap and selling it expensive, they're going to utilize that infrastructure that they've put in as much as they can. Now, here's the missing piece. These batteries are supposed to be charged into a narrow range between 30% and 80%. They're not supposed to use the other 20 above that, and they're not supposed to use the 30% below that because that degrades the batteries, leading to fissures, leading to fire. So they're supposed to stay in that range. It's like when we buy an electric car. They say, don't overcharge it. Best is to go to 80%. Don't run it completely dry. And they say because it'll damage the battery. Well, yeah. And on industrial scale, what you're doing is you're breaking down the battery, which could lead to a catastrophic fire like we had. And remember, it only takes one battery failing, one D battery failing, which is what's in there. But here's the thing. Industry has the right to go beyond those parameters. They have the right to go 20% beyond. 20% of 80% is 16%. So that 16 plus 80 is 96%. My point is that if you're profit motivated, you've got 100% capacity and you're only allowed to use half of it, but you have this wiggle room. If you consistently are using it to maximize your profit, you might be damaging those batteries. I'm not saying that happened. I'm not asserting it anyway. I'm just saying that the state authorities have a goal and they're relying upon an industry that has a profit motive to maximize the return on investment. And that can lead to abuses, potentially, as a result of that. By the way, the oversight by our authorities is very, very thin. This has been sold as green tech, safe tech, better tech, and the oversight that we're finding of these facilities is very limited. Let me give you a couple examples. Monterey County Fire was told in the original permit, the worst case scenario was that one rack, 3,000 or so batteries, and one day was the worst case scenario.
Oh my God.
They did not have the capability. They didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the training to deal with anything close to what happened there. We put up fire departments at all the major airports in this country that train ceaselessly to deal with a crashed plane at that location, which almost never happens. But we pay for them to be there for that eventuality. And this industry puts in these incredibly huge and dangerous facilities. There's no fire fighting capabilities. They have their internal systems, but if they fail, nobody could put these things out. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
The fire department showed up and left 5 minutes later because they knew they couldn't do a thing about it.
They left?
The site is currently being managed. Yeah. Our good firefighters showed up the night of the fire, and 5 minutes later they drove out because they knew it was dangerous and they couldn't do anything about it. The current management of the site by fire is being done by a private company paid for by Vistra, because our fire department doesn't have the money or the resources to be on that site managing the ongoing monitoring of the site. The county doesn't have a toxicologist. They don't have any of the resources that are needed to be able to determine ultimately what came out of that plant. So all of these things that are needed are things that we're depending upon the very industry that's trying to maximize the utilization of these installations
and maximize profits.
So, yes, and our elected officials in their goal to decarbonize have been very, in my view, lax in the way that they've put requirements upon the industry.
Mm-hmm.
The industry self-monitors the way they're using these batteries. If they're overcharging and over-discharging, that's data that they have. You can't get your hands on it. It's not being monitored by a third independent agency or source. So it's all internal to the company. The company's not releasing that information. Imagine that. We don't know whether or not they were overcharging or discharging these batteries, and they're not telling us because they're not going to, in my opinion. I don't think they will.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
So the oversight process needs to change if this is going to continue to be the path we're on. Drones. There were no drones on site to make it possible to monitor what's coming out of the plant. Why don't we require drones that can monitor these things that they catch on fire, whether it be a big one or a small one? None of these things that are common sense. And yes, it's all in the rearview mirror that we're assessing this, but there have been fires before Moss Landing.
Uh-huh.
So our elected officials, in my opinion, John Laird, our representatives, both at the federal and state level, they need to get their act together, and they need to start putting some requirements on this industry so that the community is not left holding the bag, so that people's lives aren't torn to pieces and there's nobody there to help them.
Yeah.
There's been no financial support to any members of the community. There's been no declaration of disaster. There's been no teams coming in to ascertain what has happened to people. None of those things you would expect to have happened.
Exactly.
And yet on Facebook, you see hundreds of entries of people still struggling with health problems.
The County of Monterey did not declare a state of disaster for this fire. Did I hear you say that? Incredible.
Neither did the state. The farm workers were out in the fields the very next day. There's this really striking photograph of a tractor plowing a field with the fire in the background. It's really something. I expected that the company would do what they could to manage this situation, and mitigate as much as possible their exposure. I didn't expect that the state would disappear. And you mentioned Glenn Church earlier. He's done a wonderful job. He's been fighting for this community. But, our supervisors in Monterey are doing some things. They're trying, but, that's the only place, and they don't have the resources. And the state, again, the state's gone. They're just not here in the community. They've run away from it. And I'm sorry to say that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's what I see too. Now, tell us a little bit about what Never Again Moss Landing is doing. I attended the wonderful panel that you had at the Hot Enchilada, and you've got this other great event coming up Sunday. Talk with us about that and how your wonderful community is stepping in because the state is not.
Yeah. Well, look, you asked her that Calvary's not coming. Yeah. But I was saying that to folks about 2 months ago. It became clear the state was just running away from this. But you know what? I have some good news. The Calvary is starting to come, and it's not-for-profits and individuals who have experience in this area, environmental advocacy groups, organizations that dealt with industrial toxic accidents over the last 20 and 30 years, individuals. There's a gentleman who flew in here on his own dime from Boston a week and a half ago, and he took samples at some of the sites that we showed the highest deposition of metals. He took samples that'll reveal to us the level of dioxin that has been deposited from this fire. And dioxins are even more toxic than these metals we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard the word dioxin until about 3 weeks ago, until I was speaking to one of these not-for-profits, which is just shocking to me that the authorities, have not even mentioned dioxins as far as I can tell. So I'm talking to these folks who've reached out saying we want to help. And they're saying we're concerned about the dioxins. And this one guy flies in on his own dime, and he's paying for the testing, which is very expensive on his own dime. and we're going to have results next week. By the way, the county put together basically a list of requests and requirements for the company, one of which, and this just came out in Hunter Brook Media 2 days ago, one of which was that they wanted the company to test for dioxins. Now, the company pushed back, and Monterey said, okay, you don't have to do that. The water board is still pushing. But the fact is, the company has pushed back against any testing for dioxins. So guess what? Who's doing it again? The community. Why? It shouldn't be like that, but that's what's happening.
No,
so let's get back to your question about these events. So, look, we have some groups that are starting to help us in ways that we as just, citizens don't know how to do these things. So there's a group called Green Action, and their website is greenaction.org. And they're reaching out with queries and requests to the state Department of Toxic Substances and requiring answers, which they have to give to some of the good questions. And we didn't know how to do that, and they're doing it on our behalf.
Nice.
Save Our Shores is working on a proposal to try and maybe do a survey. There's a lot of organizations that are starting to show up. So one of them is the Government Accountability Project. And what's great, and if anybody listening is interested, they have a completely anonymous and a very sophisticated way for whistleblowers to be able to report out on governmental and industrial malfeasance. And while I'm not making any assertion here publicly that there's been malfeasance, what I am saying is that if anybody out there had information they were concerned about sharing and they needed to protect their privacy and their identity, they could go to Government Accountability Project and reach out to Leslie Pace, I believe it is there, who handles their health and their health department section. And they could have a very confidential way to share information if they were aware of anything that needed to be shared confidentially. But this group came to us and said, we want to help. We're concerned about what's happened. We're taking notice of what you guys are doing. And so they've been instrumental in helping us to connect with the people who are going to be at this panel on Sunday. So again, at the Prunedale Grange, we will come together. And what will happen is that we've got 3 panels over a 2-hour period of time. One will be some local folks. Never Again Moss Landing will be there. The second panel will be some national experts on these types of industrial disasters. We have a woman flying in from East Palestine.
Wow.
We have the gentleman flying in who did the dioxin testing, and he's a free agent that does this at disasters that are happening all over the country. And then we have a third panel, which will be some scientific folks, including Beatrice Golem, who's one of the top industrial accident experts, and she's a toxicologist, one of the top industrial accident experts in the country. She is a professor at UC San Diego. So she'll be Zooming in. So this is all happening on Sunday at 1 o'clock at the Prunedale Grange in Prunedale. And we'd encourage folks to come down. I think there'll be an extraordinary amount to learn. There'll be room for some Q&A. And you can go to our website, and it's listed there. Our website is neveragainmosslanding.org. And right on the homepage, there's information about this event. There's information about what we did last weekend with a multidisciplinary panel. You were there, where we discussed with the community in the room and asking questions and having a dialogue. We discussed some of what had been happening and what had happened to the community. So we just want to continue to do everything we can to learn, to engage, to share, to educate. And that's what this weekend will also be about this Sunday at the Prunedale Grange.
That's excellent. For those of you who are just joining us, thank you. You're listening to Community Matters. I'm Becky Steinbrunner as your host, and I'm honored to be here with Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing, representing a community that endured and continues to endure a huge disaster of the fire that happened at the Vistra battery plant, the largest in the world. And nobody knew that until the fire happened, right? So if anyone would like to call in, please do so. 831-265-5050. Join the conversation. And Brian, can you talk with us about how people could get involved and help with this big task that your group is doing?
Sure, yeah. Well, our website, shout out to Blue Sky Phoenix and Michelle Coe, who put it together for just a very, very low cost. She's a friend who did this wonderful website for us.
Beautiful.
You can go to the website and you can sign up. There's a join us function, and there's also a contact us function, and people can go to make a notation of what they're interested in, what their skills are, what they're interested in learning about, etc. We don't share the information with any outside organizations. We have about 550 people on our email distribution list. And that's where people can connect. They can start getting periodic emails from us. They can hear about upcoming events. They can, talk to us directly. Email that, we get is info@neveragainmosslanding.org. So all of that can happen to the website. There's also a resources page, which has a lot of material posted about batteries, about our government response, about Vistra, about, these fires, what's going on. So it's a great resource for anybody. If they really want to learn about this, they can go to the website, and they can also click on the resources page and find tons of data there and see and learn about what came out of this plant and what thousands of people inhaled. Unfortunately, there will be people that get sick from this, and they won't know why, because it'll be 10, 20 years from now. But everybody breathes this stuff. Whether or not, they got really sick, it's unfortunately in us. And for some, it's going to have a real impact.
I mentioned at the gathering on Saturday that I had spoken with our family's veterinarian, and he lives in Prunedale, and said that he noticed a very significant increase in the ruminant animals who aborted their young right after that fire.
Yes.
So it is...
Yeah, there's been a big impact on livestock.
Yeah. And the wild animals, too. We don't have a finger on the pulse of all of those, and the food chain. I know that Dr. Aiello from Moss Landing Marine Lab has said that there are some studies going on about the cumulative impact in the food chain, because indeed this is everywhere.
Well, the other thing that happened is that there were several, Moss Landing Marine Labs has an enormous amount of resources in terms of the scientific brain power that works out of that facility.
Yeah.
And so there have been a couple of, Zooms with a bunch of folks kind of reporting out on what they've been learning. So I was in on one of those, and I guess you call him the mosquito guy, right? So he's here out of Moss Landing Marine Labs. The mosquito guy, it's his turn. So he reports out, and he basically says, so we went out after a week after, 2 weeks after, we went into the estuary to look for larvae, for mosquitoes. He said there weren't any. And then he said that we couldn't find any insect larvae.
Oh.
None. Now the food web, starts there, right?
Yeah.
And so the guy who looks for mosquito larvae didn't find any larvae for anything. Now there's still life out there, right? But we don't see these impacts. We don't realize how they are impacting these creatures, not to mention ourselves. We're not even seeing how it's impacting us. How are we going to see how it's impacting, the environment and the creatures in it, right? But there are these. If anybody wants to look or listen, stop, listen, learn. Like I am saying to our elected officials now, it's there. The information is there. It's right in front of us. And we're learning more all the time. And unfortunately, we're not learning good news, right?
Yeah.
And it's all these things that are like layers in a layer cake. We have at the website a diagram showing 1,000 people who reported illness from all over the region. We have our diagram that shows the levels of these metals at all of the 124 sites it's live through Google Maps. You can go there, you can click on it or hover over it, and up come the numbers. And you can see. You can see that in Davenport, the numbers are under 5 parts per billion. You can see that over in Royal Oaks, it's up to 500 parts per billion. It's right there. It's all right there. But do we want to listen? Do we want to stop? Do we want to hear? Do we want to learn? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical at this point after 4.5 months, unfortunately. But you're trying, Becky. You're trying to help people understand, and I appreciate that. I really do.
We have to continue this work, and we have to continue to press our elected officials and those agencies like the EPA who are responsible. They are responsible, and they cannot just yawn and let Vistra drive the bus. We cannot allow this.
That's what's happening right now.
It is.
That's how it's going right now.
And that's what's happening in Santa Cruz County with the new draft ordinance that will allow these 3, maybe more, battery energy storage systems, BESS facilities come into the county. The county is allowing New Leaf Energy, who is the applicant and the owner of this thing, to write our county's ordinance. Now, that cannot be. And what we as people have to continue to demand is that there be convened a technical, impartial group of experts to advise. Because every county can come up with their own regulations that are more restrictive than the state. And the state's fire codes are changing this year. The state fire marshal is looking at this. There's a big work day, a symposium in July 24th, where they will be looking at this. And we have to hold our fire departments and our county elected officials accountable and demand this. Some, I've had on my program here Mr. Barry Brannon from the city of Morro Bay in San Luis Obispo County. They've got a city council. And they've got a city council that's listening to the people and imposing a temporary moratorium on lithium battery storage. And that's what we've got to have here. It's not going to happen unless everybody listening tells a friend or 5 and says, we have got to call in, we have got to write a letter. And if enough of those calls and letters come in, I want to say that the power of the people can make a change. In the odds of the wealthy Vistras and New Leaf Energies who maybe have supplied large campaign contributions to Mr. Panetta and maybe Mr. Laird. I know Vistra.
They both have received contributions from Vistra. I know that. That's correct.
And we have to hold them accountable. We cannot allow them to get away with this at our expense, our health expense, our future, our agriculture, our environment. We cannot allow it. So I want to thank you, Brian, for the good work that your community is continuing to do. Do not lose heart, because we've got to keep fighting. We do. We've got to link arms, and there's a coalition throughout the state of California. I know that you know that. You want to talk about that?
Yes. Well, I haven't had time to connect with them. There's actually 3 amazing women there in Santa Cruz I met with at the beginning of the week. And they're going to be our knights. They're the ones that are going to go out and make that connection and start to move it forward.
Excellent.
You asked earlier, we just need folks who would be interested in helping. They can go to the website. They could say, I really want to help. I want to get involved. There are a lot of people who've done that, and I haven't had the time to get back a hold of them. But I'm hopefully going to be able to start doing that here with some help, reaching out to folks who have volunteered. But it's tough. We're building the car while we drive the race, right? So it's been a real challenge. And then we have our own lives. We have our own situations. We've been moving for the last couple of weeks. It's everybody's got their lives, and yet we're trying to make enough time to keep this thing moving. And again, I can't thank you enough for continuing to bring this to light so that people understand what's happening and what it means.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know that you are attending many conferences, Zoom meetings, and writing and doing just so much to keep it alive and the people connected and giving them hope that something's going to happen. And regarding that, there are some pieces of legislation on the floor. Do you want to talk about that a bit? Because we need to support that.
There are three bills. One is John Laird's Senate bill, and it does some stuff, but it doesn't really put any control back in the hands of the community, and it doesn't really include the voice of the community. It's got the unions and it's got the firefighters involved, which is great, and it has a little bit more bite in terms of the fire departments up front. But oftentimes in these rural communities, the fire departments don't really know what they're up against when they're sold this bill of goods. So not sure how much it's really going to help. And then there's Don Addis's bill, which is, being modified to try and make it so it's something that can be considered and get out of committee. It's a good bill. The challenge it has is it puts greater offsets, and it puts some of the control over these things back in communities' hands.
That's a good thing.
The whole thing about it is, but it's being fought for that reason.
Absolutely.
The state has taken what people I don't think realize is that if the community says no to a large facility, 200 megawatts, I think is and above, if they say no to it, the operator can just go to the state and do an end run. So Morro Bay isn't out of the woods yet, right? And we're not out of the woods. Vistra is able to flip the switch and turn on their other building. They've got another building this building was 300 megawatts, and there's a 100 megawatt configured almost exactly the same. And they've said they're not going to turn it on, but the county can't stop them if they flip the switch on that. So, the authority, the ultimate authority on these things, rests with the state rather than with the community. And that's a real challenge. So the other bill is, I don't have the number on it, but it was introduced by another assemblyman out of San Diego where they had a very big fire back at the beginning of the year, just before our fire. And that one, I haven't been through it, but it looks like it's a pretty solid bill. So, look, our goal is to get our local authorities to vote to support every single bill that's trying to do something to create some control of the industry, and then to let it all go to reconciliation and then work really hard to get a good bill out of that. Because, if you've got three bills, they're all going to be bundled up, and they're going to try and come up with one bill that, that pulls out the best, hopefully, rather than the worst. So we'd like to see that happen, and we'd like to see these bills all make it through the process and then go through the reconciliation between the Senate and the Assembly so that we end up with hopefully a pretty good bill. But right now, the only one that looks like it's assured passage is John Laird's bill. And again, it really does in many ways come up short. I mean, it's as much covering political butt as it is, doing something that needs to be done, in my opinion. But, I'm just some guy. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I see in the bill.
Well, I agree with you, and Senator Laird has much to say about his bill that he put through and requires a lot of reporting. Well, there's no consequence, and in fact, Vistra did not follow any of it, and nothing happened. Yeah. So saying you've got to give us another report, that doesn't do anything. But AB 303, Don Addis's bill, does.
Yes,
it identifies 3,200 feet setback from schools, residences, and sensitive environmental places. And that's why it's being fought against. Because as the CEO of Community Energy, Robert Shaw, said, we don't like that because it will limit where we can do this. Right, and then the final bill is AB 434. That's the point. And then the final bill is AB 434 from Carl DeMaio in San Diego.
Yes, thank you.
Support that because it's a moratorium and it ties it to the fire code. Yep. We've got 30 seconds. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing, thank you, and please tell us one more thing you want us to hear.
Be safe, live well, get involved, make a difference, protect your kids.
Yeah. Protect your kids, link arm with your neighbors, and shout at these people who are not leading and being responsible. Thank you so much. We'll see you Sunday.
Yes, you will, Becky. Thanks for everything. Thanks for the